Hi, everybody. I'm Gwendolyn Sterk of Sterk Family Law, and I'm honored and privileged today to have with me Jody Robinson, Wealth Manager. Hi, Jody.
Hi, how are you, Gwen?
I'm great. Thanks for being with us today. You know, I've known Jody for quite a few years, and we're going to talk about the things that she does in the venture she's taken with a book recently. But first, we want to deal with retirement benefits. If you're listening today and you're going through a divorce, you have been through a divorce, as a general rule. Now, remember, there's always exceptions to everything. But as a general rule, retirement benefits are generally split 50-50 during the divorce process. And then because there's that Roth piece, sometimes we have to separate out the pre-tax and post-tax element of that investment in order to divide it equally and to be fair about it. But what we find to be true is that so many people get confused about how do I value that retirement and what do I look at? So before we get started, I wanted to explain to everybody the difference between defined contribution plans and defined benefit plans. So a defined contribution plan is relatively easy because it is really like a pool of money or cash. It has generally a set dollar amount, and it's something that you can then equally divide because you can look at, hey, it's worth X amount of money, 50% is X and 50% is Y. That is much different from what we call a defined benefit plan. In a defined benefit plan, it really is like an annuity or a payment that's going to be paid over time starting at generally a specific age. So let's say that the plan provides that the earliest retirement age is age 65. What they're going to do is they're going to pay out then a dollar amount per month that they utilize doing a calculation, annuitizing it over the lifetime of the participant. And then sometimes you can get what's called a COLA or a cost of living adjustment on that sum as well. There are also other areas that have to be considered, and that is whether or not the spouse is also going to receive a benefit. And if that's the case, then sometimes that adjustment is made and it's lowered so that the spouse can continue to have the benefit throughout the balance of the spouse's life. Now, before I get too technical, because we can get into a lot of different details, if somebody is in pay status or not can make a difference about how we do that calculation during the course of a divorce. But the most important thing I want to stress today is you need to know the difference between a defined contribution versus a defined benefit plan. Now, why is that important? Because you can't generally put a dollar amount or a value on a defined benefit plan because it's speculative, meaning that if you become the recipient and you start paying out benefits and you're eligible for the fund at age 65, but the fund ends at age 66, then you only got because you die, you only got a year's worth of benefits. Whereas if you live 20 years, then you have a lot more benefits. So it really depends on life expectancy and how long you actually live. So that's kind of the difference between those two types of plan. And it's important because that's what we deal with when going through a divorce. Now we're privileged to have Jody today because she's going to tell us what to do if we're going to divide a defined contribution plan. So Jody, first of all, welcome. And do you have any distinction or other way to define defined contribution plan for individuals?
I think you defined it really well. The only thing I would say about the defined benefit plan before we move on to defined contribution plans is with the defined benefit plan, sometimes those benefits, they're based on the other spouse. And if the other spouse dies, then you lose that benefit too. So just make sure that you're working with your lawyer to figure out how to equitably split that, knowing that with a defined benefit plan, you may be tied to that ex-spouse for many years after the divorce, depending on how that is divvied out. On defined contribution plans, that's what we normally think of as a retirement plan, a 401k, 403b. There's many different letters and numbers for them, but essentially an employer retirement plan that you contribute to, and maybe there's a matching. With those types of plans, you have to make sure that when you're splitting up the assets, that you understand that there are things that may have to be done before you would do a rollover. One of the things that people commonly make as a mistake is when a defined contribution plan is split up, they use something called often a QDRO, QDRO, which is a qualified domestic relations order. And that says how it's going to be split up. It's put into a special account, the split off part, if you're splitting it off from your other spouse. And that special account allows you to take distributions without penalty, but you still have to pay the taxes if it is a deferred contribution plan. So you have to be very careful about that and not just roll it over, because you have to look at your financial planning needs first.
Right, and you only have a given period of time to take that out without getting those the taxes plus the penalty. So you really have to work very closely with your lawyer and your financial advisor if you're intending to do that. And then you have to be very careful that you only get one time to do that change and rollover. You can't do it on several occasions. It's not something that goes into infinity for you. It's something that's very limited. And I think it's very important because you have to make sure that that quadro is entered, and you need to make sure that you follow up with your attorney's office to ensure that it's been completed, and then work with your financial advisor to move it forward or to roll it over into a plan. Now, let's say, look, I don't want to be in my spouse's company's investment plan. You can roll it over to an IRA account. Is that correct, Jody?
That is correct. The thing that you want to make sure of, and a lot of times the company will tell you that you need to roll it out of the quadro into an IRA. That's not true. You don't have to do that right away, and you don't have to do that with the company where the quadro is housed. I would even recommend that as you're getting to the end of your quadro process, that you engage a financial planner and figure out your next steps. Figure out if you need a soft landing, what you're going to have to take for distributions, and how to do that in a tax efficient way. That's where we would also want to loop in a CPA to help figure out those taxes, because the last thing you want and most people, I went through a divorce myself, you're not in a financial position where you have tons of extra money laying around and you don't want to come to next tax season and get a big bill because you didn't withhold any taxes or you withheld too little. Most defined contribution plans will have a mandatory 20% withholding on a quadro, but that may not be enough. So you just have to make sure that you're taking all those right steps along the way.
Now, let's say that you're going through a divorce and you've gotten the distribution from the funds, you placed it into an account. Could you use it to buy a new home? Or let's say, you want to pay cash for a home, or you want to take your equity in the home plus some of the retirement. What can you use it for? Could you use it for a home purchase?
Hypothetically, yes. I think that you just want to be very careful. I wouldn't recommend taking out your entire retirement account to buy a home, because that's decimating your future. I think the biggest question that you always have to ask yourself, and I was just talking with a really amazing person yesterday, and he said to me, and I'm going to requote him, that what would your future self think about the steps that you're taking right now? Will you regret it in the future if you take out your entire retirement account to buy a new house? And have you withheld enough taxes? Because if you take out $100,000 to buy a new home, you have to remember that that gets added to your income for the year. So you may have been in a 15% tax bracket, but that could bump you up to like a 24% tax bracket. So it could very much be decimating. Now, having gone through a divorce myself, I did use some of my quadro money to pay for a down payment for a house so that I had a soft landing, because I didn't have money for a down payment. I had used quite a bit of the money for the divorce that I had in savings. So I did do that for a soft landing, because when I calculated it out, I figured out that I would be paying less on a mortgage than I would if I was renting an apartment. So it gave me a nice space that I could start over. But again, you just want to make sure that you're not sacrificing your future for something where you're making a shoot from the hip decision today.
Sure, and you may not have the ability, based upon your age and based upon the employment situation and status you're in, to rebuild that retirement into the future. So that's another thing you have to consider.
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak for my personal situation. It did hurt my retirement. And, I'm catching up now. I'm saving way more than I would have had to save had I not taken out that down payment for the new house.
Sure. Now I have another question. If you are going to preserve the money, or all of it, or a large portion of it, even a small portion of it, what investment factors should you consider when you do that?
So after you've decided what you need as far as withdrawals for your soft landing, as I like to call it, you have to think about what you want to do next. Generally, people will roll it into an IRA outside of the employer of their ex-spouse, because who wants to leave their retirement account where their ex-spouse works? So when you move that into an IRA, you have to figure out first, how much risk do you want to take with your investments? Who do you want as that partner who's going to guide you through and help you figure out where you should be with your investments? And then also looking at, is that person, do they have conflicts of interest? So I'm a fiduciary. I do not work on commissions. What that means is that I base my, income on a fee that I take from the account every year. And so knowing how much that fee is up front is really important. And if you are working with somebody on commissions, to know up front how much you're going to pay right now, and then how much you'll be paying in the future. Because sometimes with, say, mutual funds, you pay an upfront fee, or you might even pay a fee underneath or behind, but then you'll also pay what's called a trailing fee. So you want to be cost conscious when you're looking at your investments, but you also want to look at risk management. You want to look at service. Does that person provide financial planning, or are they strictly an asset manager? Those questions are all very important. And if you go to my book in the back, I have a whole chapter on the questions that you should ask a potential financial planner.
Right. And I think that's important to know. And I also have a question. A lot of times people say, well, I don't have enough money to go to a financial planner. Maybe I only have X, Y, or Z. That's not true, right?
No. I mean, so there are some financial planners and financial advisors that have account minimums. So you can always ask that. Oftentimes it starts at $250,000. But in my case, I look at the person and their potential and where they want to be. I've started out with, people who are just out of college with their first job and they have no money, but they're saving really well. And then I have people, anywhere from 10, 25 up to $2 million plus.
Right.
Just really look at somebody who wants that engagement, who wants to be successful, and they want my help in that process.
Right. So I guess the message to everybody today is that there are options for you. You don't have to be stuck in that rigid, and you can find a financial planner who's going to help you and help you create a plan for every aspect of your financial dealings, right?
Yeah, there's as many financial advisors and financial advisor types out there as there is flavors of Baskin-Robbins ice cream.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's important to know that it is available to you and an option, and something that we encourage everybody to do after the divorce. If you're talking about the tax consequences and you're talking about the rollover. So this is really a critical time that you're making sure that you're not doing it on your own, right? You have to make sure that you're following the guidance of your attorney, your accountant, and your financial advisor.
I can't tell you how many times people have come to me after the fact and said, I wish I would have hired a financial planner and a CPA to guide me through this process, because now I'm looking down the barrel of a huge tax bill.
Sure. So that's really critical. One other question I have for you is, can you give us any other insights you have about how to save right after the divorce? So you're getting through the divorce. Obviously, whatever pot of money was there has been divided in some fashion, generally equally, sometimes a little less or a little more. And maybe you're getting maintenance, formerly known as alimony or spousal support. Maybe you're not. How do you restart and kind of regroup? You're half of what you were before, really.
Yeah, well, and sometimes even less than that, because not to throw the legal system under the bus, but with some of the new laws that came into effect, I think it was 2018, women in particular, I think, are not treated as fairly in the legal system because they're taking on the majority of the parenting. They're getting less in child support. They may not be getting anything in maintenance. So, for myself, I was under the old laws because I got divorced, back in 2000, 14. I lose track of time. But, right now I'm dealing with a situation where we're reevaluating child support, and I may get moved under the new laws that I don't believe are as fair. So, you've got to look at your situation with how much you're getting and know that that could possibly change, and figure out right now what you can do to live on 70% of what your income is right now. And that other 30%, you need to be putting that away for an emergency fund, for your retirement. And if you're interested in saving for your kids' education, to do that as well. If you can live on 70% of your current income, you're going to be setting yourself up for so much more success in the future, because Social Security these days only covers maybe 25 to 30% of what you're going to need in retirement. So if you're living on less right now, that's going to make it a lot easier for you. You're going to have a lower portfolio reliance rate in the future if you can learn how to live on less now. And it's not easy. When I went through my divorce, there was a point, and I was a financial planner at the time. There was a point I was using the food pantry. And I know right now with COVID, there's a lot of families that are making that decision. Do we have food or do we pay rent? And I want to tell you, don't be embarrassed to reach out for your local resources for help. Reach out to your school if you're struggling financially. Maybe they can help you with getting on a free or reduced lunch program for your kids if you have children. Just don't be afraid and don't be ashamed. When you start out after a divorce, it's totally new. You've never gone through this before, unless you've been through divorce twice, but
You're right
there. But it's a very difficult time, and you'll have to do a lot for your self-care. This has nothing to do with financial planning, but it has to do with your core, and take care of yourself. Get enough sleep, eat good food, make sure that you're moving, make sure that you're exercising. Do all of those resiliency practices, because that's going to help you make better decisions in your finances and in the rest of your life as well.
Sure, and I agree with that, because I think that people, the other perspective I wanted to give on it is that you're living on less than afterwards, and then as you start to add more income in, maybe you get a better job and you're moving forward. People adjust their life then to what they're making at the time, but if you can set aside money and live frugally and have the savings, that'll help you as well when you're talking about the 70%. But I agree, you cannot be afraid of the process. You will make it through. You just have to adjust, and you have to get to the point that you're good to yourself to be able to move forward. And look at those entire options, which is why it's good advice. Don't cash in the entire thing. Figure out what you're going to do, what age appropriate, if you have children, all the different factors. And Jody, I know you've done this into a book to help women in particular. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Oh, thanks for asking, Gwen. I actually wrote this book mainly for my son, because he's a teenager now and he doesn't want to listen to what mom says sometimes. So I thought to myself, this was way before COVID happened, but I thought, if something happens to me, what words do I want to give him for the future so that he can grow up and be a good person? And I also wrote this for people right now who may be struggling, who want to hear some inspiration. It's filled with great interviews of people who have overcome huge odds to have a happy and successful life. And so the book defines success in the way that, you will figure out for yourself, what does that mean? And then you move forward, you work through the messages that you've learned growing up. You receive a lot of messages as you're going through divorce about your sense of worth and where you stand in the world now, and how do you move forward. So that book really kind of navigates that with using some great storytelling.
And the book is entitled Money Messages, Get Out of the Red and Into the Green, Emotional and Financial Freedom to Transform Your Life. That's quite a title, because it includes and encompasses all of that, correct?
Yes, and Karen Putz helped me write the book. She is a deaf, backwards, barefoot water skier. She's done some amazing things in her life, and she also wrote a book called Unwrapping Your Passion. So we brought the idea of passion together with financial literacy, and I think we did a pretty good job. We've gotten some great reviews on it, and I'd love to get this in hands of anybody right now who's struggling that needs just a little pick-me-up and inspiration.
That's great, because we all can use that, especially some of these days now, like you say, going through COVID and different people having so many different experiences. So where can they get the book?
You can find the book on Amazon. And if you don't have a lot of money right now, you can also check it out through your library if your library uses Hoopla. So it's both the audiobook and the ebook are available on Hoopla, and you can find the paperback, the audiobook, and the ebook on Amazon.
Well, that's perfect, because I know that having that financial terminology, I say to people when you're going through a divorce, I don't know what, I learn what they do for a living, but I don't know the ins and outs of what they do for a living. So just like when you come into our world, you have to learn new terms and definitions. If I was going to your employment, I say to a client, I'd have to learn your terms. The same is true for financial planning. So this is really important to get an understanding of what the terminology is, what the basic strategies are, and then making sure that you're working with a good financial planner. So if you're listening today and you're about, or you're in the process of, or you're following a divorce, it's really important to start working with a financial planner, and Jody can give you some of that advice. And we would recommend that you read her book as well, because that empowerment piece is so important, because you do have to have the right mental stamina. Would you not agree?
Oh, absolutely. And, finding people that can help you is really important. So find those great people. Gwen is a fantastic divorce attorney. She will go to the mat for you. And if you need anything along the way, as well as far as advice and support, I offer a free clarity consultation. I don't charge anything for that first consultation. And if you look at the card that we have there, you can find me at meetwithjody.as.me. And my name is spelled Jody.
That's perfect. And we encourage everybody to reach out, get the information, buy the book, and let's all, get to the point that we have an understanding of the terminology and what we need to do next. As we always say at Sterk Family Law, knowledge is power. So let's try to get as much information as we can. Jody, thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day.